Yeah, yeah. So, a few notes, a few thoughts about being an inspirational leader. I think the first to say is, I don't know if an inspirational leader would truly call themselves an inspirational leader. But an inspirational leader might, be more so nominated by people that think they are a leader or who choose to kind of follow them. So, it's hard to say if myself as an inspirational leader. I still am a young person. I've had the opportunity to lead some teams and businesses over the last handful of years. Um, but I can tell you some of the key traits and characteristics that I think make up an inspirational leader and what I try to kind of embody myself to become someone who hopefully one day people would look at and say is an inspirational leader. And, a handful of those traits, they're all important, but I think the first one kind of starts with humility. I think, people who are inspirational leaders, have humility baked in, are willing to always be learning, and can admit when they are wrong, but also importantly, aren't always just seeking to have the right answer. And I think humility kind of opens up the door for a lot of other characteristics that, makes an inspirational leader. A second important note about or characteristic of inspirational leaders, I think, is the ability to listen. Um, I think a lot of people tend to think about leaders and, picture some of, the Abraham Lincolns of the world, the Churchills of the world who are charismatic speakers.
Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome to episode 96. This week we have a special guest, Ryan Brooks. Ryan Brooks is a serial entrepreneur, the founder and owner of Real with Ryan Media, Positive Pup Dog Training, and an account executive for Field Agents. You can't say Positive Pup Dog Training without a smile on your face. From his podcast and YouTube channel, Real with Ryan, to his 100,000 following on TikTok and Instagram, which I'm sure our listeners will want to hear about that TikTok story. Ryan's content emphasizes living a balanced both and lifestyle that can turn passions into a paid reality. From entrepreneurship to sales to dog training, cooking, health, wellness, and travel, Ryan is on a mission to explore all facets of living a meaningful life and share the journey and lessons learned along the way. With that, welcome, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And actually, we're going to go way off script. And because I know we have a lot of listeners tuning in that are very curious about the 100,000 followers on TikTok. Tell us your story and magic secret sauce to getting to that substantial number.
Yeah, sure thing, sure thing. So the TikTok and positive pup dog training story kind of go hand in hand. It really was my first, dive into entrepreneurship. So little background, grew up an only child with some stepbrothers here and there, but also had a ton of dogs. And so was always working with dogs. Dogs were my siblings growing up and learned how to train them from a young age. In college, to help put myself through school, actually started positive pup dog training, where I worked with individuals and had the motto, I would help you help your dog. And so working with people, teaching clients how they can train their own pets, train their own pups, and kind of did a ton of dog training for several years. Well, that was fine and good until 2020 happened. COVID came around, and all of a sudden, in-person training was, of course, very, very hard to do due to the pandemic. And so what I did was say, hey, people are still loving these lessons. People still have dogs that need to be trained. And now that they're stuck at home with them, sometimes it's even more than ever. So what I did was took, a lot of the lessons that I was teaching people in person for those training sessions, started creating content, trying to figure out how to do that, and put that content online. So that's where I started the TikTok and started posting dog training content there. That's where I started some of the YouTube channel and some of the other types of social media. And honestly, it took probably 8 to 12 months of steady posting this content, kind of learning what it looked like to post content and get better at those skills before I finally had a little bit of traction. And, the nature of TikTok is kind of a viral platform and it kind of feeds off that virality. I had a few really big lessons that went viral, and then kind of one video where I had my dog Ollie. I would strap him up with a harness. I'd get on my skateboard and I would tell him yip yip, and he would start running down the road pulling me. And so it's kind of the modern skateboarders version of dog sledding. And though, people love those videos, they're super super fun to watch. And that kind of virality really spiked and gave me some of the first bit of that snowball, which, over the following handful of years was able just to build through various different types of dog training, as well as other forms of content, that led to, kind of the 100,000 or so followers that I have now.
Well, first of all, Charleston Cooper Adventure, my dog, will say thank you because he's like, great, mom is going to give me more training, but he loves it. He's a smart guy. And also, great tidbits for folks who are listening. It's about consistency, it's about finding that hook, it's about solving a specific problem for your market and doing it in a way that catches their interest, intrigues them, makes it playful and fun to learn new ways to solve their particular problem. And that's really the secret sauce to growing a following on any of the platforms you choose. And also, you want to be intentional about where your people are. TikTok isn't for everyone, but it
Hmm.
is for a lot of particular audiences. So if you're tuning in and you're curious about becoming more viral, building a community, having a movement that works for you, start by figuring out where your people hang out. Is it on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok? And then just be consistent as he was sharing. But we're going to pivot and get into the secret sauce of what's your secret sauce around being an inspirational leader, Ryan.
Yeah, yeah. So, a few notes, a few thoughts about being an inspirational leader. I think the first to say is, I don't know if an inspirational leader would truly call themselves an inspirational leader, but an inspirational leader might, be more so nominated by people that think they are a leader or who choose to kind of follow them. So, it's hard to say if myself as an inspirational leader. I still am a young person. I've had the opportunity to lead some teams and businesses over the last handful of years. So, but I can tell you some of the key traits and characteristics that I think make up an inspirational leader and what I try to kind of embody myself, to become someone who hopefully one day people would look at and say is an inspirational leader. And, a handful of those traits, they're all important, but I think the first one kind of starts with humility. I think, people who are inspirational leaders, have humility baked in, are willing to always be learning, and can admit when they are wrong, but also importantly, aren't always just seeking to have the right answer. And I think humility kind of opens up the door for a lot of other characteristics that, makes an inspirational leader. A second important note about or characteristic of inspirational leaders, I think, is the ability to listen. Um, I think a lot of people tend to think about leaders and, picture some of, the Abraham Lincolns of the world, the Churchills of the world, who are charismatic speakers. They're outgoing, bombastic. They can, really engage an audience in a room. But I think that the listening portion and being a leader who can listen to their employees, their colleagues, their peers, their clients, being able to listen and learn from people is going to have more of an impact on someone's leadership ability than some of those outgoing characteristics. Um, the third thing kind of goes along with humility some, and that is just the willingness and the drive to learn. I think a leader always needs to be trying to learn and improve themselves, but also encourage the people in their organization, their followers, and the people around them to continue learning. I think as soon as you've kind of lost that drive to become a better person yourself and to continue learning, that you'll stagnate as a leader. The final two things I'll kind of roll together is the ability to make a decision with a purpose and the ability to communicate. So decision making and communication, I think, of course, we know that leaders lots of the times are the final people, the one that has the final say in some of the most important decisions in their organization or whatever it is that they're leading. The ability to make those decisions and then communicate about those decisions and why they're making the decisions and what information have they listened to, have they learned from, and what is leading them to finally make and enact those decisions and communicate that clearly. I think all of those things are some of the five key characteristics of an inspirational leader that I don't necessarily have, but I at least aspire to work on those attributes myself.
Yeah, I mean, those are great ingredients if we were putting a recipe together for an inspirational leader. And perhaps some of our listeners are tuning in today and thinking the same thing, where they're not sure if they're that inspirational leader. They're not sure what their secret sauce is. But I agree, humility is a huge part of it. There's nothing worse than having a conversation with somebody who's full of themselves, because there's no space when ego is there for really being seen and heard. And you can't lead if you can't see and hear the people around you. And you certainly can't build a thriving business or a community, a movement, a nonprofit if you're not able to hear the pain points of the people you're serving and build the community to solve those real problems that they're facing. And ultimately, sales leadership is about authenticity. It's about being humble, like you shared, but it's a lot about that ability to listen. And it's funny, they always have that statement, always be selling ABS.
Mm,
I think it should really be always be listening, because when you're listening, you become an excellent salesperson. You become
hmm
an excellent problem solver. And then the people you do serve understand that you hear them and see them. And of course, they're going to want to work with you, because most of the problems in the world can be solved when we actually stop and listen. So powerful stuff. Great start to our conversation. I do want to ask you, Ryan, what do you think inspiration means? Like, what does inspiration mean to Ryan?
Yeah. So, I think inspiration to me, it kind of means a few different things. But I think if I were to really sum it up, what it means is to expand your current thinking of what you're capable of. And so, as I am being inspired by other people, it's usually I've listened to someone who makes me think that I can do something I previously didn't think that I could do. Whether they're sharing an idea, a book, a model, whatever that thing might be that has been shared with me, it now makes me think that I can accomplish something that previously I didn't think I could accomplish. And so I like to kind of use that in an effort to inspire other people as well. And so as I talk, a lot of things I will focus on in kind of my day to day life is what are some of the little actions that I can take on a day to day basis that are just slowly improving my life and compounding my life's trajectory, and how can you, the audience or the listener, make these small little tweaks, these changes in your day-to-day life that will make you a better person and start to expand what you think you're capable of. So I think that's what inspiration means to me if I really were to sum it down to its fundamental components for myself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that the first way you define it, expanding your current thinking of what you're capable of, and even borrowing that belief from others through books, strategies, methods, stories that you hear. And then just taking those small steps and planting those seeds so that other people can see that and believe that for themselves. And it's interesting, one of my core values is inspiration, and it's also my superpower in business is inspiration and building community. And I think how that shows up in kind of planting those small seeds are pretty much any time I am myself. Like if I am depleted, I'm not at my top game, I can't do this. But when I'm myself and I go out anywhere, for
Mm.
example, I went on a date last night and I our waitress seemed kind of shy, and so I was complimenting her on her glasses and really just trying to like bring her out of her shell. And then she was smiling and she was more confident. Also, I recently went and bought a new car. When I was working with the new salesperson, I
Hmm.
was trying to build up her confidence and give her sales strategies so that she could hit her bonus for that month. So it's really just about listening to that person's life and that person's story, and where you can offer something of value, something that's going to help them grow even bigger and better. Because ultimately, we're all in this together. We
Yeah.
want those around us to thrive and be better. And really, the biggest problems we face in business and in the world are not going to be solved alone. They're going to be solved together. So, with that in mind, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and I want to ask you some things
Hmm.
around peak performance. So, Ryan, how do you define peak performance and how did you arrive at this definition for yourself?
Yeah. So, peak performance, there's a couple of different ways that, I think about peak performance. So, I've got kind of the narrow definition of peak performance, and, that's performing optimally when there is a time to perform. The example I have is in 2020, I ran a triathlon. And on the day of the race, I needed to perform at my peak for that one moment, or I guess that, 3 hours of moments. And that required months of training, work on my health, work on my routine. The day before, I made sure I had to have 12 hours of sleep, ate a sack of sweet potatoes to carbo load, had all my supplements, etc. And I was ready to perform at my peak, but in a very acute way. I think what I like to, and of course, that is one definition of peak performance, being able to perform when, the time is necessary to perform there. I think what I like to prefer to think about actually is going to be, what I'll throw a word in there. It's peak sustainable performance. And what that means to me is how do you perform optimally over the course of time? Because a lot of what I think about is not just how do you have just this one great performance that skyrockets your life or career, but how do you take these little actions, these little steps, these little habits in a sustainable way that compound into, the compound interest of your life. And I do kind of take the stance that if you're able to, perform marginally better on a day to day, week to week, month to month basis, the results you'll see after 20 years are going to be astronomically higher than if you just focused on having, one peak day every couple of weeks or every month or two. So peak sustainable performance and action, I think, is going to outweigh just those one peak moments,
I
except if you're doing a triathlon, maybe. So,
I love this. I love this peak sustainable performance. I might have to use that in one of my future talks because I have the peak performance method. And it is basically about that. It's about taking a holistic approach to peak performance. We talk about health, we talk about clarity, we talk about the 5 key areas of your business. So I love that sustainable piece of it because ultimately we are not always at our best. We are humans, and I have to remind myself of that sometimes. I think I'm superwoman and I'm
mm,
not. And this comes from, recovering as a perfectionist, but peak performance in the sense of living a holistic, healthy life that's also aligned to the legacy you want to build is like you just said, it's getting 1% better each day and also giving yourself grace on the days where it feels like you slid backwards,
mhm.
maybe 10% or 100%. You made a mistake. It doesn't mean all of that momentum and forward movement has been lost. So, giving yourself some grace and forgiveness, and as my tattoo on my arm would say, let go and trust the process as you take that action. But I love this peak sustainable performance. It's the best answer I've had to that yet. So kudos, Ryan.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
you're so welcome. Now, on the way to uncovering peak performance, I'm sure you've run into some challenges and obstacles. Can you
Mhm.
share a couple of the big challenges and obstacles you've run into?
Yeah, yeah. Whenever you were talking about, not beating yourself up when you're having off days, I think that really resonates with me as well, and is going to be where I have my biggest challenges and setbacks. And I've got this kind of attitude of trying to achieve a lot, trying to do a lot, trying to perform good all the time. But of course, I'm human. I make mistakes. We all do, and there are going to be days when I don't perform well or don't feel well. There's even going to be weeks. And sometimes, I'll have a period of a couple months that just aren't my months, and things just aren't quite going right. And so the biggest challenges that I have is giving myself grace to not be perfect or not be hyper productive or overachieving all the time, and understanding that sometimes we actually need to step back, have that space to be flawed in order to kind of get back to where we want to be. And I think we do need to find that balance and can't just be hyper productive all the time. Maybe there's a few people out there that really can put the pedal to the metal and sustain it, but I certainly am not one of those people, and find that I'm at my happiest whenever I can, put the pedal down to the floor, ease off about 10%, and then find kind of that cruise control where I can just make sustainable action towards my goals. So not beating myself up for the off days is kind of going to be the biggest challenges that I tend to face.
Yeah, so there's a funny story. I was kind of smiling as you were explaining this because I also struggle with that. That's why I shared that in response to your other answer. But there's this book back, I think, from the 90s. So, you guys, I'm aging myself just a little bit, maybe
Mm,
2000s. Bed of Roses with Christian Slater, and I forget the name of the female actress. But essentially, this woman is this super type A perfectionist kind of woman, businesswoman, and she works, I think, at like a law firm or financial firm, and he's a florist. And
mhm,
she has a death in the family, and she's going through this grieving process, and her company says she can't work for 2 weeks. And I love this movie because there's this one quote where she spends the day delivering flowers with him. And at the end of the day, he asks, "How do you feel?" And she says, "Well, I didn't do anything. I feel so indulgent. I didn't
mm,
contribute to the gross national profit, the GDP." And it's so funny. I relate so much to that. I didn't contribute to the GDP today. And
oh,
it's crazy how, coming from the corporate America world, and studying your for your MPA, you are trained in our society to contribute to the GDP, to
mhm,
feel successful and holistic, and like, oh, I'm so great, and it's this external validation. I'm here to tell all of you today that doesn't work, and actually what sells are your imperfections.
mhm,
So when I get up and share all of the ways I have messed up, the fact that I have a 10 level spinal fusion and struggled with an addiction for a while, when
mhm,
I share my flaws and how I've struggled, people relate to that and want to work with me or be part of my community because they realize I'm just like them. I'm
mhm,
not perfect. I don't have it all together. I don't have all the answers. So, yes, you guys, give yourself grace. The earlier on in your life that you figure this out, you'll be so much happier. You'll achieve so much more. You'll attract and be a magnet for the right people. Stop putting on this corporate mask, the societal mask that we've been fooled into thinking is reality. Pull away that blank smoke screen curtain and just be yourself. Sorry, I'm like preaching a little bit there. All right, so I'm going to shift a little bit here and ask you,
yeah,
how do you create a culture of peak performance in the work you do today?
yeah. Yeah, so when it comes to creating a culture of peak performance, I think this kind of comes back to a little bit about listening and humility for inspirational leaders. Um, and when it comes to creating that culture of peak performance, I think really what you want to do is create a culture of honest and authentic feedback. And so I know lots of leaders often are very quick to receive praise, to receive pats on the back when you've done something well. And people that are working with you or especially under you are definitely, going to tell you when you've done a good job. But sometimes it can be a lot harder to create and cultivate a culture where people can point out where you've made a mistake or where there's things that need improvement. And I think that really falls on the leader of an organization to open up that space for communication and feedback and improvement. And whether as a leader, you're giving your own self feedback and saying, hey, I had this presentation. I appreciate the compliments, but I think I could have improved on this component, that component, X, Y, and Z. Or just going around a room and saying, hey, I want us to be really honest here. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Please give me, two or three things that I could have improved on this presentation or this project, et cetera, and really try to invite that feedback from your peers, but especially subordinates if you lead a team. I think once leaders are setting that standard, opening up those avenues for honest and authentic feedback, that will permeate the culture and everyone will feel more comfortable giving that honest feedback, especially when there's things that people think can be improved on. I think that starts from the top and permeates down through an organization. There's one other thing that I will mention is that there is a little bit of an art of feedback giving. And so, as a leader, trying to learn and understand how is good feedback structured, how to receive feedback, how to give feedback. I think it's something that is very valuable for any leader to learn in order to kind of open up and encourage feedback amongst their team.
Yeah, absolutely. My goodness. It is so, I am so grateful that one of the things that corporate environment did teach me well, and maybe I just had great mentors and I was fortunate because I can't say this is the case for all of them, but I did learn a lot around receiving feedback, giving feedback, and really that used to be very uncomfortable for me. Today, though, I'll tell you guys, my assistant, she is delightful. If you're listening to this, Rojabella, I hope your ears are burning in a good way. And we've definitely created in a relationship where she has no problem telling me where I mess up and I need to hear it. And I'm half the time I'm just like, I'm so embarrassed I made this mistake. Thank you so much for telling me. So just kind of a funny small one. I was saying chat GPT instead of GPT. And
Oh,
she
yeah.
finally corrected me. I think it was the first week working together. And I was like so mortified. I said, thank you so much for correcting me. But now it's funny. A lot of people make that same mistake and they don't even realize because they haven't looked up the system. They've just heard
Hmm.
it. And it's very easy to get that one thing, incorrect. But honestly, I believe that when we give feedback to others and it's honest, authentic from the heart feedback, even when it is a mistake that they've been making, those are the people that care about you. When
Hmm.
you care about somebody on your team, whether it's somebody above you, below you, a peer, a loved one, it means you actually care enough to have that very uncomfortable conversation to say, hey, this is a blind spot. You clearly don't know you're making this mistake. And I just want to tell you, this is what's going on. And by the way, I think you're amazing. And here are all the
Hmm.
great things you are doing. But if we could fix this one tiny thing, we'd be even better together. So, absolutely create that culture for open, honest feedback from your peers, your subordinates, your customers in
Mm.
particular. You guys,
Yeah.
if you aren't getting feedback from your prospective clients, your existing clients, your referral partners, you're insane. You are not going to continue growing. You will not remain relevant. The market is constantly changing. Lead generation, sales tactics, marketing is constantly pivoting. You need to have your ear to the grindstone, your ear into the world to stay relevant. So I'll get off my preacher block on that. All right, Ryan, how have you optimized your customer experience when it comes to peak performance?
Hmm. Yeah, so actually think this kind of ties in really well to that feedback from your customers, um, point that you just made. So Whenever there's any sort of customer experience issue, I find the best way to start to resolve that is just to have a conversation and open up a conversation with your customers about their experience. So I get on the phone with the customers, and this kind of comes back to the listening and learning aspects of leadership, is just try to ask them tons of questions about their experience and kind of what happened in this particular, situation if there was a negative experience. So, what were their expectations before using your product or service? What was their need? What was their problems? Where were things either missed or where were things nailed? I think through the process of, getting on the phone with your customers helps you understand, first it helps them feel like they've been heard. It feels like you are a company, a person who is trying to understand where they're coming from. And just through those actions of listening to them and hearing them, I find that it resolves almost all of the customer kind of experience disputes or issues that I've run into. But then it also opens up the door for innovation and improvements in your business products and services. Your customers will tell you, where did your product miss? Where did it hit? What features would they want to see? What parts of their service would they like in the future? All of those things, those product innovations, as well as, their experience, I think you're going to be able to solve those through, just getting on the phone with your customers, being vulnerable, asking questions, trying to listen and trying to understand them.
Yeah. So again, you guys, it comes back to listen, be curious, ask questions. People like to talk about themselves. People like to be seen and heard. They want to feel valued and important enough that you're going to ask them questions about their experience. And they want to also feel like they're part of something bigger. And so if your company is building a legacy and you have customer feedback loops or customer stories you can share where you say, gosh, all of our customers this quarter helped us build a well in Africa for a village that didn't have drinking water. When you can tie their impact directly to how the company is giving back to communities, that's really powerful. But you can't do that if you're not listening and you're not improving and you're not letting them be seen and heard. So it's like kind of the theme today. I love it. So
Mm,
we're going to pivot a little bit. We're going to talk about revenue. You ready for that, Ryan?
I am ready.
All right, Ryan. So, when have you left money on the table and what did you do to fix it in your business?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's two stories of when money has been left on the table. I'll start with the one that's a little bit more fun. That comes back to positive pup dog training. So back in college, I was starting up this business. And if anyone's in the dog training business, it is a liability nightmare. There's a lot of things that can go wrong when dealing with our beloved four-legged friends, and clients that love their four-legged friends. So getting into this business, I was needing to cover my butt with some liabilities and get some legal help. Well, I had a rate I was charging for my dog training business where I was getting real money, but there was a lawyer who worked at the University of Arkansas, where I went to school and was going at the time, and found out that I was doing dog training. And what we did is came to an agreement where I would train them and their dog. In exchange, they would create some of my legal contracts and documents. So that is a fun case of where no money was exchanged. Money, of course, was left on the table. They probably would have paid me if they asked, but we were able to create, a great exchange for some legal services and, the training of their dog. So that was kind of one thing. When you find the opportunity to meet with clients and do something fun, do something special that benefits both parties, sometimes it's okay to leave money on the table. That was the time that it happened. The other case is going to kind of shift gears into, the corporate world, where I was working with Walmart, in the organization I'm currently a part, field agent. So, Walmart, of course, Fortune 1 company, huge company. they've got enormous budgets, all the money in the world, more or less, and you could have the opportunity to nickel and dime them for every product and service that you are selling in our case. But one of the things that Walmart provides in our case is a amazing relationship and the opportunity to meet and expand into more clients. And so even though there's the opportunity to create some bigger contracts, get some more cash value out of an exchange with Walmart, what we decided to do was to go into a business relationship with them, lower the amount we're charging them. But what we've done is create a great partnership with one of the biggest companies in the world. And through that, the doors have opened into so many more client relationships. So that's an example of how you can leave money on the table, but those relationships, that value is going to be worth it. So you don't always have to be scraping up as much money as you can, but when the relationship's worth it, it definitely makes sense to leave some money out there sometimes.
No, both those are great examples. And it's funny as we're talking, my dog is coming in here. You must know I have the dog trainer on here. He's like staring at me. I look behind me. I'm like, what is happening? He's
Yeah,
so
it
creepy
happens.
sometimes.
It
Just like
happens.
stare at you. Stop. Um, yeah, no, those are great examples. So for business owners that are tuning in, and maybe you're a solopreneur, you're still very early days, and there's a service that you really want to take advantage of, but you don't have the funds to invest. Sometimes where it makes sense, you can do an exchange and a trade. And this is valuable for many reasons. One, it helps you grow your business while adding value, capturing testimonials and stories, getting referrals, hopefully, if you do a good job with that particular partner. But it also helps you become a referral partner because you've both, experienced each other's service. So you can actually very validly and authentically start referring that person. So it's a really great way for business owners to get started. And I don't really consider that it can be leaving money on the table. You want to make sure it's an equitable trade, but also think beyond that initial trade. What doors, like you said, is that going to open up beyond that? And I love the Walmart story because if you really think about the value of your time, does it make sense to nickel and dime on certain deals? No, it does not. And that's a hard lesson for most of us to learn. But for example, this is just coming up recently because I went to the dealership and everybody's like, oh, it's such a nightmare to go to the dealership and negotiate. And I'm like, well, not really, as long as you know your limitations and what you want and you have clear intentions, it's not that stressful.
Mm.
But I mean, I could have continued to be difficult and spent hours more negotiating, but I know the value of my time and I got exactly what I wanted. So there's no point in doing that. That's just silly. That's ego, you guys. So put that aside. It's a waste of your time. And then you waste money. All right. So my last money question for you.
Okay.
Ryan, what is the next shiny object that you want to turn into a revenue stream?
Yeah. So the next shiny object, the chat GBT or GPT, if you will, I think, the shiny object that has my attention is, of course, AI. Um, I am someone that likes to be, not right on the cutting edge, but tries to stay in tune with what is happening in the market in general. And I do think that the shiny object that will create a lot of revenue opportunities is going to be AI in its various, capacities and forms. Now, I don't know exactly what that will look like for my business. I already use it to help with content. I use it to help with ideas. Shoot, I'll go to my refrigerator and type in my ingredients, and it helps me come up with a recipe. So it can do tons of crazy things. And I think there are going to be almost infinite business applications. And it's just on business owners, entrepreneurs, organizations to understand where will AI intersect your business and how can you jump on it and be a leader in that industry early, and be a first mover, because I think there's going to be some pretty big first movers advantages when it comes to capitalizing on AI. So AI is really going to be the big answer. I'm sure that a lot of people are thinking about the same thing. But if you aren't, trying to understand what is AI, how does it work, how might you use it in your day-to-day life or organization, I think it's at least something that you should keep a tab on and start to just educate yourself on, because there's going to be some huge revenue opportunities coming from it.
No, I love it. In fact, I have a few business partners that are doing some really amazing things in this AI space already. So, for example, for you fellow podcasters that are tuned in or aspiring podcasters, there's this platform that I support. I do kind of some fractional revenue work with them. It's called Podcast AI. And so our podcast is hosted on Podcast AI, distributed. We create our show notes with using AI. We create the chapters using AI. We get snippets using AI. All of the beautiful marketing materials Ryan will receive after this recording will be from Podcast AI. Whereas it used to take me a lot of time, money, and outsourcing of resources for video editing, etc.
Hmm.
This replaces that, and it makes it so that podcasters and people who want more exposure just show up for having a great conversation, and this technology runs most of that for us, which is great. And then there's also some marketing agencies that I'm working with that are creating AI chatbots that actually help you move people that are prospective buyers from your website to booking calls with you. And there's a
Oh, wow.
million other things that we're developing through these marketing partnerships that are coming out into the market that are going to be really powerful, where they are streamlined for consultants versus coaches versus agencies. And there are different formulas that make it a little bit easier for a layman, a regular person who's not as techy, to start taking advantage of these. But even if that's not of interest, you guys, Canva has an AI magic creative space for creating your stuff, making it easier. There are lots of tools you can use with Zoom, whether it's Otter AI or Fathom Note Taker, that create amazing notes for your customers, improving your customer experience. So there's a million ways to do this, and there are podcasts out there that talk about the brilliance of AI. So we
Hmm.
could geek out on that all day. But anyhow, Ryan, when you come up with your shiny object with that, you'll have to give us an update and send us some information so we can get that out to our listeners. We're going to
Yeah.
wrap up our interview with our last two questions. What is the best piece of advice that you would share with others today?
Yeah. So the best piece of advice, a little bit of a tricky question. And so, in thinking about it for a little bit, I think the best piece of advice I could give to anyone is to be relentless in the pursuit of yourself and who you are. Um, I think all too often people go through their lives kind of never really examining what it means to be themselves, what they like, what they're good at, what they want to do. And I think so many people are quick to give advice that might be very specific towards them. And it could be either applicable or not. And so I think the advice that I would hope applies to everyone is to just really try to dig deep inside of yourself in an ongoing journey to discover who you are, and then apply that to your life. And hopefully through that, self pursuit, you'll find more meaning, happiness, success in whatever capacity that means for you.
Beautiful words of wisdom. My last question for you, Ryan. What's the legacy you wish to leave behind?
Yeah. So, I haven't thought a ton about legacy or what I'd leave behind. I don't necessarily have these giant grand visions for what I want to do or accomplish in the world, or, necessarily create a business that changes the world, or turn everything on its head and make everything better. But what I do, I think, want to leave behind is the memory that I was someone that brought, light and happiness to the people close to me. So I want to be remembered by my family, by my friends, by my loved ones, by the people I work with in my community, as someone that made even just a small positive impact on their lives. And, I think that's one thing that we all can do. I think it's great to aspire to do huge, enormous things and really change the world. But, I think if all of us just tried to be as good as we can be, and make these small positive impacts on the people around us. I think if we're all doing that and just striving on being, better versions of ourselves, making the impacts on the people we are close with and we love, I think that we're all going to be moving forward and we'll all help make the world a better place.
Absolutely, you guys. It's all about the small things that make the biggest difference and have the biggest ripple effects. So you heard it from Ryan Brooks. Ryan, this is a great interview. For folks who want to reach out to Ryan, want to work with Ryan, want to check out his fun TikTok channel, I'll have all of his social media links in the show note chat, as well as the YouTube links. Thank you so much, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a ton, Holly. This was an amazing conversation. I had a blast, and thank you for opening up this space and allowing me to come and talk to everyone today.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your stories and wisdom with the listeners. To our listeners, we'll see you on our next episode. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.